Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I played some games. I finally played some games. Host Madelyn.
I'm your Emma calmed down and played just a few less games. Host Emma.
And welcome to this 7 weeks of gaming. Save data. A supercharged save data. A 16%. Right? Larger save data.
Something like that.
Than it usually is. Very exciting stuff. Thanks to last week's end of the year podcast, you get an extra week of gaming recap from us this time.
Yeah.
Because as Emma rightly told me last time, nobody wants to hear you talk about The Last of Us for half an hour on our end of year recap when you only played it in December.
Yeah.
So brace yourself. Have you had enough Last of Us discourse these past couple of weeks?
I mean, it's timely. It's reviving again in like 10 days or whatever. I don't know exactly when the first episode airs.
It's the 15th. So
does Clickbait Boyfriend still have HBO? Do we have to watch at least the first episode? Apparently It's an hour and a half long, so...
It's an hour and a half long? You could do the whole story of that game in an hour and a half.
You couldn't do it. No, you couldn't. Not an hour and a half, Madelyn. Don't be dramatic.
Down. Instead of doing the, expand it that they're doing, just be like... Let's cut the part where the whole winter section. Whatever. Anyway.
Hopefully the other episodes will not be that long.
It's HBO. You never know. Yes.
I understand wanting to get to, Ellie's there. You know.
Yeah.
So that's probably why it's longer.
Well, we do have HBO. So we'll coordinate our viewing capacities offline here. Here's his password. No, just kidding. So, 7 weeks of gaming. It's the end of the year where as Emma rightly was pointing out to me as we were setting up for the show, our last save data gaming recap was before Thanksgiving.
Yep.
So it's that month of the year where I do 75% of my gaming.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about it. I've got 6 games to talk about.
Wow, do I have more games than you? That's crazy. No, I have 6 that I really played, and then I have a couple of tiny things.
All right. Well, if it's all the same to you, I can start with my Cold Steel report.
Everyone tunes in for your Cold Steel report, so yes.
Did you know that there's a Cold Steel anime this season too?
Really?
Yeah.
That's exciting for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna at least watch the first episode. So look forward to that on the blog, where I will inevitably write up some thoughts. But anyway. I finally finished, before I went home for the holidays, I finished Act 1 of the game.
Somehow I thought you were going to say you finished the game, even though I knew that was wrong.
I finished Act 1 of the game. Reen, whose name can now be said, doesn't have to be muffled, Reen, is back, baby.
Back, baby, back.
Back, baby, back. So we'll see how the game goes from here. We got him back and then I stopped, so I assume I'm playing as Reed now as opposed to the children, but we'll see.
Find out.
It really there was some very cool stuff. They played the opening song. The kids had to fight Reen while he was in his monster state, and they played the opening song during that, and that was very cool.
Talk This favorite trope.
I love that, yeah. And then Reen had a inner depth of the mind moment that was very good, made me a little bit emotional, if I'm being honest.
Emotional,
and then there was
about Reen?
Emotional about Reen.
I'm nervous for you. Okay, go on.
I hate that little guy. And then there was a showdown that was conceptually good, but as always, it's just everybody has to say something, It's a little bit there's just too many characters and they all have to say something, unfortunately. I was thinking I think that some of these characters, I think this game would be better if characters were just allowed, instead of talking to them, to just punch the other guy in the face, mid-conversation. When Reen's talking... What?
It's a good note. A strong note.
Yeah. Like, when Elisa's talking to her evil dad, I think she should just be allowed to punch him in the face instead of having to talk to him. When Reen's talking to his evil dad, I also think he should be allowed to punch him in the face instead of talking to him. And I think that would make the story better and snappier. That's my main critique of these games, I think, is there's just not enough, like, just decking people when they're being
like
annoying.
20 hours of content.
Honestly.
Punch.
That's my comment on Cold
Use
Steel.
Your words, Emma.
No, don't use your words. No more words. Words aren't allowed anymore.
Punchy punch.
Punchy punch. That's my Cold Steel report. I will keep you abreast of developments and how Reen gets on settling back into his life. His hair's permanently white now, so that's good. But he doesn't have the scary red eyes anymore.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, I'll pick up where one of our podcasts left off with the rest of Cult of the Lamb. I had played more of Cult of the Lamb, I think, than I often play of our games in advance of the podcast, because I got so sucked into it. But I did, like right after I got home for the holidays, finish up the game. And like I said on the show, this game really hooked me. It was a big year for roguelikes for me. After, like, I feel like my first experience with the roguelike was Spelunky 2, which I played for the show. And Spelunky 2 was, like, not my jam, because I was really bad at it. And it's, like, actually a roguelike.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was a big year for roguelikes for me, and I always love a little management sim, so definitely a Madelyn geared game. I'm going to be interested to see what the major free content update that they've been, like, sort of bandying around for some time this year brings. I don't think it would hook me back to the game, but if it's, like, enough stuff, it might get Click With Boyfriend to give it a play. Because he, like, also really enjoyed it, but I don't think would start. He got very, you know, attached to McCult, so I don't think he would necessarily start it. And he had, I think, similar critiques as I will level in the next few minutes. So if the content update, like, addresses some of these sort of little issues, I could see it being played in our household again. But that would be a dangerous thing. So maybe I should hope that it does not do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you don't remember Cult of the Lamb from a couple weeks ago, it's, you know, you are a lamb cult leader, and you take care of your cultists in the village, and you also go dungeon raiding. So roguelike, management sim. And so like, I'll say I really enjoyed this game. Obviously, I played a lot of this game over a pretty concentrated period, which is the mark of Madelyn enjoying a game. But I did sort of feel like for me that, like, as I got to the final third or final quarter of the game, the wheels fell off a little bit. It was still fun, but the like balancing of the taking care of your village and the dungeon crawling was really fun for the first half, the first 2/3, and then eventually was, like, not really fun anymore. I don't know. Again, like, I played way too much of this in one sitting, and so, like, maybe that contributed to how I experienced this, but I did eventually just, like, max out everything in my village, and it became really easy once you had enough cultists to do that. And then after that, they just start throwing gold at you, and so it becomes even easier to, like, continue to level everything else up.
Yeah.
But, like, you also can still only, like, cook so much food and whatever for your cult. So it became this kind of, like, albatross around my neck of, like, at a certain point, there was really nothing else for me to do in the village, but I still had to be there to, like, make sure my cult didn't just poop everywhere and totally mutiny, right?
Yeah.
So even though at the end of the game I was at the point where it's like, I actually want to be doing longer, I just want to go full Binding of Isaac, full Hades, and be like, how long can I survive type runs, I felt like I still had to deal with the village mechanics enough that I couldn't just, like, throw myself into the combat side of it.
Yeah.
Which was a little frustrating because the village was not very interesting at that point. As much as I still loved going up to all my villagers and inspiring them, that was a big plus. I just think something about the balance of that fell apart a little at the end. Because there's no point, you can't ever get your cult to a point where it can truly self-manage.
Yeah.
You can brainwash them, you can put them on a fast, you can get 3 days, but it didn't seem like you could ever get beyond having 3 days to dungeon run, which I would have liked. I just would have liked for them to be able to cook their own food or whatever at a certain point. But the final boss was like a satisfying final boss, although I did kind of just tank my way through it, which is fine. Maybe I would have felt like I could have abandoned my village if I had played more ruthlessly. All the like guides I read about this game were like, you should be slaughtering your villagers, like kill them, who cares? And I'm like, no, I won't be doing that.
We're a kind cult.
Yeah,
a happy, welcoming cult.
I name them all. Like, I'm not just gonna like murder them. I don't know. Anyway, it's definitely a recommend from me, but because I know this content update is coming, I would sort of say, like, if you haven't played it already, it might be worth waiting a couple months to see what they have in the pipeline. Because I wouldn't be surprised if some of my critiques are addressed by like adding some more buildings or letting your villagers like eventually be able to cook their own. Like if they could add like a kitchen building that where my villagers could cook or something, that would have resolved like 50% of the issue. Also, I kind of want to play the dice mini game in real life.
What is the dice mini game?
There's like a dice mini game where it's like you're playing against another animal for money, and it's like you roll the dice. You have 3 columns of 3, so like a 9 by a 9 square thing.
Okay.
And you roll a dice and you put the dice in the column, and like if you stack up a bunch of the same number, you get points. But if someone on the other side puts that number in their column, it gets rid of all your dice. And I would like to play that against a human player because I felt like even the high level AIs sometimes made choices that a human wouldn't have made. And I was like, this is a kind of a fun game. Maybe I will make my boyfriend play it with me.
Do it.
I just might. Anyway, good stuff. Good game. Excited to see how they're continuing to work on it. But one of my year-end obsessions. Long live McCult. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's see. I finished Pentiment, which I think that I had been pretty far in last time we talked about it. Mm-hmm. It looks like I finished it like the end of that week.
Nice.
So I think I must have been pretty far in. I really liked it. I really liked that game. It's one of those things, like occasionally like I'll watch or play or read something where I'm like, oh, I'm appreciating this like intellectually, but I don't know if it's like very emotionally effective. I don't know if it's really like connecting with me in that sort of way. And then I get to the end and I'm like, ooh. Like the fact that I'm like, I don't know if I'm emotionally connecting with this. And then like at the end, it's like, yes, you are. Punch. That sort of like gets me worse than when I'm like invested emotionally, like consciously the whole time. But I mean, the way it works is there's 3 acts that are sort of like separated by pretty significant amounts of time. And during each act, there's like a murder or attempted murder that you have to solve by using your limited time and collecting clues on different people. And in the first and second acts, you have to make like an accusation of who did it. And it's very good at like creating different feelings about it, because the first time you're like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna solve this murder, and then the second time you're like, oh, I can't solve this murder. Like, it went so poorly last time. And then the third act is sort of about like wrapping everything together. And ultimately saying something a little bit about like the lasting nature of art and stories themselves, which is, I like that stuff. So it worked very well on me. And you see, like, you're in the same town, so you see all of the different townspeople, like, changing and going through their lives, sometimes based on, like, things that you've said to them or stuff that has happened in the story. So you get, like, attached to, like, this locale and all the different people in it and keeping track of what's happening to them as you, like, pop in every now and then. And ultimately, it's just that it's a very well crafted little game. You know, I'm glad that I played it. It was very good. And that's my Pentiment review.
Well, speaking of podcast games, all the games are podcast games. That's not true. There's like
your podcast games. Okay.
Yeah.
You're transitioning from yourself in Cult of the Lamb, speaking of podcast games.
That's correct. I don't listen to you when you talk. I just sit and I wait for it to be my turn. Throwing it back, this feels like a really long time ago. 7 weeks feels so much longer than 6 weeks, especially when you have the holidays in there.
Yeah.
But in part 1 of this end of the year's games with little levels I can play over and over obsessively, I talked about this. We had started playing this again a little bit on the 6-week podcast in November, but we finished Ollie Ollie World. We rolled credits on Ollie Ollie World. And I remember, well, my notes reminded me anyway, that on the podcast last time I said, oh, I've still got my skills. Like, going great. Not so hard. And then, like, immediately after that podcast, we got to the 4th region, and the game was like, now you officially get to learn how to manual, and we are going to up all of the scores for the little local heroes by, like, 1 million. And unfortunately, Josh and I had already sort of set the precedent of, we're going for all the local heroes, we're going for all the challenges, and we couldn't stop. So the difficulty spike, like, right where my PS4 died when I was playing it the first time, is, like, it's, like, immediately after that, dramatic difficulty spike. For the levels in general, but, like, mostly if you're going for the score stuff.
Right.
Which you are if you're playing this game. You don't have to go for it as obsessively as Click Click Boyfriend and I do, but, like, I sort of can't imagine playing Ollie Ollie World and just being like, I'm just good getting through all the levels.
It doesn't have vibe potential.
It does have vibe potential. It would be such a different playing experience.
Sure.
I guess is what I would say. I feel similarly about Neon White, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So in the end, we got almost all of the challenges and high scores. I think we missed just one challenge because we just could not figure out. There's late tricks, which is like you're in the air and you can do like another trick in the air. Mm-hmm. But it's really hard to do. And we were just like, we're not going to do this one where you have to get 12 late tricks before the first checkpoint. This isn't going to be fun. It seems arbitrary whether we get these or not. We tried to look up if there was a better way to do it, and people were like, no, it's just kind of hard to do late tricks. And so we were like, okay, we can let this one go. But we did spend a lot of time on some levels going for some really sick combos, as we would say to each other over and over and over again, in order to get the super high scores, which we did a lot of the time. It does have vibe potential. There's some really bopping tunes in Ollie Ollie World. That is part of what made it possible to play levels over and over again, because the tunes are bopping. And I thought the DLC was going to be free, but it's not.
Alas.
So we thought there was going to be more, but I was like, I don't know. We've played a lot of Ollie Ollie World, and at the time I was trying to finish The Last of Us, and like the end of the year was looming, and we'd been putting too much effort into getting these like 1,000,000 point scores, and I was like, we probably shouldn't buy the DLC now and extend this obsession.
Right.
So I didn't. Based on what I remember about the other Ollie Ollie games when we talked about this game for the podcast, it does not make me want to play the other Ollie Ollie games. I think that the vibes of Ollie Ollie World are fun and the levels are fun, and pairing it back to more like, it's just like intensely difficult skateboarding does not seem like my energy.
Right.
So, Ollie Ollie World, a strong recommend, especially if you like little levels that you're going to play a little bit obsessively. Just like prepare yourself that it gets a lot harder like 80% of the way through the game.
My last Game Pass game of the year.
Best deal in gaming.
Best deal in gaming, baby. Not sponsored. Was I played Norco, which is a point-and-click adventure game. I saw a lot of people compare it to Kentucky Route Zero. There is, like, it's magical realism that's sort of about America. So there's that in similarity. But in terms of, like, how it feels to play, I don't know if it's really quite like Kentucky Route Zero. But I understand the comparisons. But you play as, I think her name's Kay. Doesn't say it very often because it just refers to it as you. But you come back to Louisiana after, like, basically running away many years ago after your mother dies. And in the wake of that, your brother Blake, who you don't really get along with very well, to be honest, has gone missing. And so you're going around trying to find him by going to, like, different areas around Norco, Louisiana, like breaking into, like, the oil refinery. Beating up some guy outside of a corner shop, dealing with your android friend, Million, who's helping you out, maybe.
People can't see the faces
suspiciously. Squints eyes suspiciously face. And you also flash back a few times to her mom and what was happening before she died, of which she was getting caught up, sort of. She was trying to make money so that she could, like, leave something behind after she died, or deal with her debts before she died. And she gets wrapped up in this very weird money-making scheme involving infiltrating a cult of people named Garrett in the mall.
Nice.
Who are trying to go to space.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, it's fun. It's interesting. You're never quite sure what you're gonna hit next. It has sort of like a weird anticlimax ending, which I kind of liked, I think. But it is something to bear in mind when you go into it, that, like, maybe you're not gonna get, like, the satisfaction you're looking for out of the story. Mm-hmm. But it's got great vibes. It's got cool scenes. It's got fun writing. And then what more do you want from a point-and-click adventure game? You know?
Sums it up. It's a good vibes week for the podcast.
Your stuffed pet monkey can help you fight. Also, that's a good one.
Well, now I'm sold. All right. Well, for me, it's time for part 2 of the end of the year. Games of the levels. You can play over and over, obsessively, where I basically 100%ed Neon White.
Yeah.
I did not go for all the ace levels, ace medals. That was more than I wanted to do. But I did, sort of unintentionally. I was just going for the presents because, like, I enjoyed the little scenes. And I didn't really realize that I was doing it in order to get the good ending.
Yeah. You
probably knew.
I didn't know until I was looking up the orange presents that we couldn't find.
Yeah.
That's not there. We haven't met this character.
Right. Our orange present, we were like, oh, we haven't met Neon Orange, so it's not there. And then Violet was like, Neon Orange is dead. We were like, oh. Huh.
Yeah, I saw that you needed all the presents for the good ending when I looked up who the orange presents were for Mikey.
Got it. So, Neon White, if you don't remember Neon White from the podcast, which was, like, a little while ago now, or if you haven't seen it on the kind of, like, year-end lists, Neon White, we're neons. Sinners.
Skip scene.
You're a dead guy, White, and you've been kind of resurrected as a neon, basically as, like, a speed-running demon hunter in heaven, because once a year, God brings up a bunch of speed-running demon hunters to, like, fend off the demons, and the one of them that's the best demon hunter gets to, like, hang out in heaven for a year. Mm-hmm. And that's been Neon Green for a long time. But you, Neon White, and your pals from Earth, Neon Yellow and Neon red and neon violet, plus your angel friends, who look like cats, are uncovering the secrets of heaven, basically. Light spoilers, I guess, some spoilers for Neon White coming. It's a Save God game.
Yeah.
Which I wish I had known for our Games in Religion podcast.
I know,
I'm not sure I've encountered too many, like, you have to save God.
It would have been a good contrast.
Yeah. Which is weird. This is not a game that I would expect to have come out as, like, yes, let's protect this sort of, like, Judeo-Christian God.
Yeah.
It was a little unexpected, that perspective for this story. Neon White seems to have been, like, the polarizing game of the year for, like, the end of year stuff, which to me is a little bit surprising.
Well, I think that a lot of people really liked the gameplay. I did not see a lot of reviews that were, like, didn't like the way that it played.
I've just seen a few, like, I don't know, I saw it appear on a couple of people's, like, worst of the year lists, and it sort of seems to me like, if you're not gonna like this, it's not gonna be surprising if you don't enjoy this game.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, as opposed to, like, oh, I'm gonna play Elden Ring, and maybe there's gonna be something that doesn't click with me for some reason, and I'm surprised by that. This game is pretty upfront of, like, okay, like, you wouldn't like this game probably because, as you were saying, watching me play, that, like, the fast twitch kind of reaction that is the whole gameplay is not your thing.
No.
But, like, that's obviously what the game is. That's not secret. And the cringy dialogue is also pretty, like, on the can.
Yeah.
So it surprised me when it turned up on some people's, like, worst of lists. It's like, why did you even play this? Like,
yeah, it's hard for me to be like, when I look at Neon White, like, I'm like, this is so clearly feels like exactly what the developers wanted it to be.
Yeah.
You know, like, they hit their mark so hard. And that seems like a weird thing to put on a worst of list, if that makes sense. Like, even if it's not your thing. Like, I look at that, like, I like I said, I get a little bit motion sick even watching you play Neon White. Yeah. But it wouldn't be going on my worst of list just because it's not for me, because you can clearly look at it and be like, they wanted, this is what they wanted it to be, you know?
Yeah. Anyway, I enjoyed the cringiness of it. I think mostly because it felt, like, refreshing. Like, I recognized that it wasn't that good, and, like, the story of Neon White, like, wasn't that good. But I liked it, you know, it had the kind of, like, Fire Emblem support conversation energy, but instead of being pseudo-medieval support conversations, it's just, like, weird little dudes.
Yeah.
Weird little guys. And goblin mode guys.
Yeah.
So, like, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that energy. I haven't gotten, I'm sure it's out there. I'm sure there's plenty of indie games that are like this, and I just don't play them, and Neon White happened to cross my system. But it was fun for me to have these, like weird little awkward dudes. So I enjoyed it. That's why I hunted for all the presents, because I wanted those dialogues, and that's why I pushed myself through all of Violet's, like, horrible side quests. I do have to say, Neon White may be the boss rush of the year for me, but not the actual boss fights with Neon Green, although those were sort of like that. But the kind of last normal level marathon, wherein you go through a segment for each of your weapon special ability cards in, like, a level that is, like, 5 times as long as any other level, truly felt like a boss rush for me. I hated it, but it is exactly what I always want on these games.
What about when you had to get the last green present, though, in that same level?
Having to do that level and then having to do basically an entire other level at the end where you're just flying through the air the whole time. It took years off my life. I can't believe I got it. I can't believe I got it. I can't believe I did it. I'm really very proud of myself.
Yeah.
Again.
Time is ticking, Wyatt.
Time is ticking, Wyatt. I was really just in it for Raz's stupid little trinkets.
True.
And Mikey's little drawings that he gave me. So yeah, I mean, it's a big recommend week for Madeline. I would, if Neon White sounds like something you would be into, a speedrunny kind of dialogue-y, silly dialogue with some speedrunny situations, it's like not that hard, I guess is what I would say. There are levels that are very hard, and it's very hard if you want to get into the actual speedrunning nature of it. But this is the kind of game that I might have been worried about playing had I not had to do it for the podcast, because it would have felt like, oh, it's a first-person shooter and you've got to do it fast, and like I'm gonna be bad at that. The entry level of it is not as difficult as you would think it would be. Because as long as you finish the level, you can move on. It doesn't. And clearly, as we discovered every time I was getting a new mission, the game does not require you to get good at every level.
No.
To move on.
Just a couple. You have to get a couple of gold medals every mission section.
And that's it. But don't miss out on the Heavenly Delights.
Yeah, you gotta get those Heavenly Delight tickets.
Good stuff.
Alright, next game for me. It's entirely, except for Cold Steel, all of mine I finished them. So, it's fun like that.
Well, look at you.
Yeah, look at me. I finished Harvestella.
Right.
Which is the, like, one Square Enix released, like, 7, like, AA releases, I guess, over the course of, like, September, December. And this was, like, the one that I picked to play off the bat, I guess, because I wasn't going to be all of them. Obviously.
Could not be all of them.
So Harvestella is like a farming sim JRPG mixture. Sort of like, I guess like Rune Factory-ish more than like Harvest Moon. If that makes sense. From what I remember of talking about those games. Yeah. So you have your little farm, you grow plants. There's 4 different distinct seasons where you grow plants. And different plants grow in those seasons. And once you have plants, you could make different foods and juices and other stuff with them that then helps you either like make money or helps you like keeps your stamina and health up while you're like dungeon crawling and the JRPG stuff of it. And then with the money, of course, you can build up your farm or build up your weapons or buy more crops so that you can sell them again or get chickens or cows. They're not actually chickens. They're cluckins, and I can't remember what the cows are called. Moo boys. Yeah, probably moo moos. And the like gimmick of it is between each season there's a little short season called Quietus, where like all the crops die and it's very unhealthy to go out in it for most people. And there's like this growing worry that like Quietus is going to get longer and longer and eventually become like the entire like seasonal structure. It'll just be Quietus and then humanity will die out essentially. So you're to sort of stop this and help like Area, who's like a traveler that's crash landed in the city alongside you, who's maybe from the future. You're going and investigating the different seas lights, which sort of control the seasonal weather. So like the closer you are to a seas light, the more that place is that season all the time, right? So there's like Springtown and Wintertown and Summertown and Falltown. They're not called that. They have actual names, but you get it.
That's what I would have called them, so it's fine.
So you go to each of these, you investigate the seas light, you pick up some party members, and then, like, there's, like, a lot more beyond that. So, there's some guy trying to destroy the world, you stop him, but then you discover, like, another secret, like, the ruins of Arya's time, which is, in fact, not the future, but a different planet, entirely. Cool. And there's, like, this stuff of, like, migrating humans, only, like, different humans sprung up. So there's like 2 slightly different species of humans and whether they can coexist, and then dealing with the planet itself and like what it thinks is best for humanity. So it sort of like goes on like 3 games worth of plot, to be perfectly honest. Like just sort of goes through them. It's very cool, honestly. Like it feels like an older game in a lot of ways, I guess.
Yeah.
A throwback. But it really does manage, for being like clearly not like a super high budget game. It manages to make some really cool set pieces, some really cool images. And I think that the writing throughout is pretty strong overall, in a way that I wasn't really expecting. Like, I went into this being like, oh, it'll be fun. I'll be farming and doing some JRPG stuff. And then I kept getting surprised by like, oh, this is pretty good. Oh, this is pretty good. Oh, that's so cool, you know?
Yeah.
While also getting like the rush of making checklists and checking them off, you know? So.
Haha. Sell me on it.
There you go. It's got lots of you get fairies from each of the seed lights that like come to live with you. And they all have their own like request lists based on seasons.
I saw that when you were playing.
Yeah. So you go through and you check off all of their things, and as you check off more, you get rewards from them that help with farming and other stuff, for example. So there's a lot of stuff that just sort of feeds into each other very well. It's a very for being like, so like there's farming and there's battling, like it's very cohesive, I think, in terms of the experience. Also, it's Go Sheena did the Demon Slayer OST, right?
I don't know.
Go Sheena did the OST, so it is quite Demon Slayer-y.
Does that mean you get the little...
Yeah.
voices? Okay.
Lots of like voices, yeah.
I'm glad you knew what that was. Well, speaking of games that, you know, feel like throwbacks, and continuing I only play games that I play for the podcast now, because Emma puts good games in the hat. Good job, Emma.
Yeah.
I played a good chunk of Triangle Strategy. Do you
Salt.
like mines?
There's some mines.
That's Triangle Strategy. I'm finding the gameplay, I think I'm like right before... I just got to another chapter that's like something part 1, which suggests to me that I am probably going to have to make my second big choice of the game. But I've to lightly spoil what I feel like is still quite early game Triangle Strategy. I've gotten to the point where I've got my little party together, my little medieval-esque party with my pink hair ethnic minority wife to be.
Yeah.
And my kingdom has fallen. My kingdom has been invaded.
Yeah. And
now I've got to protect my boy Roland.
Yeah.
So overall, I'm finding the gameplay of Triangle Strategy to be quite fun. I'm enjoying the strategic gameplay elements. It's nice to be like, I'm maximizing everybody's experience, and I'm like getting things to level up their weapons and all that good stuff. I've not yet mastered how far people are able to move and use their abilities.
Yeah.
I did have to restart a level because I was like, oh, like I looked at my turns. I was like, I can have Roland fight this guy, and then my healer's right there, so I can move her up, and she'll be able to heal him before the next guy attacks. And no, she was 1 square away. So that was like I put the game down for the night, and then I played the level again the next day. Where's my divine pulse when I need it?
Oh, well.
But I'm finding the gameplay of it very fun. I'm finding the story so monotonous.
You're at like just at the point where it started to like kick off for me. Basically.
It's not so much that if I read a synopsis of this story, I would be like, this is boring and bad.
Yeah.
Although, man, and this is not a spoiler, I don't think. When are they going to reveal that they found salt in the mine? Like, how long is this going to take?
Does Sarah even know that they found stuff in the mine?
No.
Yeah. So There you go.
Good lord. It's just like, it's obvious. What else would they have found in the mine? It's gotta be salt. Like, I guess it could be iron, but it's gotta be salt. I just keep waiting and waiting for somebody to say it. It's like, goodness gracious. It's gonna be embarrassing if it's like uranium, right? But like,
it's uranium.
But it's just so slow. And I can't even figure out why. It's not like I could point to any like given dialogue at any given scene and be like, I would cut this. I just feel like it's moving at a glacial pace.
Yeah. Again, though, like the kingdom getting invaded is the point where I was like, oh, okay, we're going somewhere now. So we'll see if it's the same for you.
Again, nothing wrong with the plot beats. I just even felt like the scenes around the kingdom getting invaded felt like they took forever.
I don't remember that clearly, so.
Whatever. It's fine. I think the Dawn Spear is probably not dead, too. That's my guess. We didn't, like, see him. We just saw him bleeding in the water, which was cool. Looked cool, by the way. Yeah. But I do have to share the Cliffhanger boyfriend response, which he was like, man, this style's everywhere now, huh?
Well, it's entirely this one team, basically, but yeah.
But he felt like it felt too blurry for him.
Interesting.
I sort of agree. I think what he's reacting to and what I agree with is that everything is like all the way zoomed out.
Well, you sort of need that for the tactics viewpoint, don't you?
No, for the tactics viewpoint, yes. But it's like sometimes in the scenes, it's like the camera is always fixed at like we're this far away from everyone.
Yeah.
And sometimes in the scenes, I would love a punch in. I think that would help what he is saying. Mm-hmm. I don't think it would actually work. I think if you zoomed in on this, it would look weird AF. But, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, enjoying it. Enjoying the gameplay enough that I will continue to play it, but I really hope the story starts to move a little faster. Because it's just... I can't believe I'm like this person. I'm like, oh man, like let's just... I feel like I understand what's going to happen in each cutscene without actually having to watch it.
Yeah.
Which is rough. While I'm at it, I'll throw out there another game I played in this 7 weeks is the Stanley Parable. I haven't come back to it yet because I don't know how to make myself play games on my computer.
Yeah, I have that problem too.
It's just not something that registers as an option that I have.
You gotta get a Steam Deck, I guess.
I guess.
Get a whole other computer for gaming.
I could do it.
Could.
I won't, but I could.
Alright, next one. I finally went back and finished Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes.
Woo!
I think I just had like 3 or 4 more chapters left based on where I left it, like in the summer, I guess. It was fine. It was fun. If you like these characters, I think that you will find it fun to spend more time with these characters. I wish that they had gone, if they were going to do this, I wish that they had gone more alternate universe with it. Like, just go, like, totally throw the plot structure out, right? And just, like, go for it. Like, do something totally different.
Yeah.
Because as it is, it's, like, different, but, like, similar enough that I'm, like, I feel like I get it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. There's some interesting stuff, like, in the 3 houses, like, Edelgard's, like, playing with fire, with, like, teaming up with, like, the very evil people, right? In her route and other people's roots. And I feel like it comes back, it's interesting how much harder it comes back to bite her in this one, at least in the Blue Lions one that I did.
Yeah.
But the game just doesn't quite do anything with it that's interesting. That's sort of how I felt about a lot of it. Like, they had a lot of interesting ideas that, like, threw interesting conflicts in with the characters. Like, there was a point where Dimitri brings Sylvain's brother into his army, and everybody's like mad at him for doing that, right? Because Sylvain's brother is a jerk, essentially.
Yeah, I remember.
And it just doesn't quite. And also with that, like, there's a couple of chapters where there's conflict about that, and then just sort of wraps up, and it doesn't quite do anything interesting with it for anyone's character. And that's how I felt about a lot of the editions, I think. Is it just didn't feel like it could quite break out of the structure enough to find something new to do with this story and the characters.
Do you think the problem is that they are having to write 3 stories every game? Because I think, I feel this way to a lesser extent about Three Houses, but I do feel like, having seen a couple of the roots of Three Houses now, sometimes it is sort of like, well, there's just something that gets dropped in this route.
Yeah.
Or we could have said something more interesting here, but we didn't quite dive into it. And do you think just the stress of having to come up with 3 stories every time means that each one is not quite as...
Probably, yeah. I mean, the more you have to write, obviously, the longer it's going to take you, and the more you have to remember and juggle, of course. So I'm sure that doesn't help. In this case, I actually think I read somewhere that was like, oh, they don't have like the marriage system in this because they don't want to like feel like players are overwriting like whoever they supported in the main game with Byleth. And I'm like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that sort of ethos of like not really wanting to overwrite the main game was like why they felt scared of diverging too heavily. That
makes sense to me.
So, anyway, if you like I said, it's a perfectly fun time. I liked a lot of the supports. I liked the more freedom that supports had to like build off of each other. Like they could reference other people's supports in their supports, which was fun. I really liked that element of it, which helps because there's less of them. Like going back to like the amount of writing, like Three Houses is a step down in number of supports per character versus Awakening and Fates, but still a lot. And this has even less. And I think that being able to like focus in on what's there makes those supports more more interesting in the end.
Definitely.
So there's that too. So I had a fun time with it. It wasn't great. I wish it had been a little bit more daring. And I'm really looking forward to Engage, which you'll probably hear me talk about a lot in the next 6 weeks.
Okay, it's time. I've put it off long enough. I finished The Last of Us. I guess, had I started it last time? I did.
Yeah.
I did. I'd gotten last time for the 6-week show, like, basically where I'd gotten... Well, for that episode on it, I'd gotten to, like, where I'd gotten before, and then I'd gotten a little past that for the last 6 weeks. Yeah, I finished it. I enjoyed The Last of Us. I think I enjoyed it in a lot of ways more than I thought I would. I just think of this game as like a game that I put down because like I was not having a good time with the gameplay whenever that was years ago. And while I'm about to level a lot of critiques at this game, I think so many of these critiques come from a place of this is like, you know, the game that invented narrative. See, I'm worried about how much we've said that on the podcast now because, like, they're saying that. That's, like, what the TV show guy is, like, saying.
I mean,
and
of course
I'm not being serious. I need everyone to know this is just an in-joke this is just a running joke that we have here at Talk This. We aren't serious.
I feel a little bit like, why are you upset at people who are upset about that? Like, it's
like, of course he has to say that.
He's hyping it up. Of course he has to say that. Like, is he saying it in sort of a pretentious way? Sure. But, like, I don't understand why people are so upset about it. That's all. It's just marketing talk.
It's not any less embarrassing. People can clown on it. But you're right. The, like, upsetness of it is weird. Like, on one hand, of course he has to say that. On the other hand, of course people have to, like, roast him for it.
Yes. Yeah.
But the anger about it. There's just so much weird anger about The Last of Us from all directions.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't quite know. It is a testament to this game that I'm, like, thinking about it, right? I'll say that. But for me, and I've said this to Emma a lot, so forgive me for rehashing all of my thoughts here on air. But I just felt like the arc of the game was weird. And it was weird in a way that makes me sort of like, for the television show. Because it just didn't, the escalation of it over time did not super work for me. It did not feel like the stakes got higher and higher and higher necessarily, which I understand, if I was telling something really realistic, it's like not necessarily how things would go. But this game is really episodic, which it makes sense why they would choose to adapt it as a television show as opposed to a movie, because it's basically told like a television show already. But I feel like those episodes, even the final climactic episode, stay quite at one level. And some of that is a reflection of the gameplay. I don't actually feel like The Last of Us increases in difficulty a lot over the course of the game. I suppose it's possible that I just increased in skill as I went. Like, that is definitely possible. And it's not to say it didn't get harder at all. I think it maybe it would increase in difficulty if you were playing on a higher difficulty and you were better at the game than I am. But I just didn't find that the difficulty of it increased over time, and in games I feel like that can really support your narrative arc if the game is actually getting harder. Not that this is a game that needs boss battles exactly, but because it doesn't have them, it was just it did feel like a lot of the same in terms of combat. Mm-hmm. And I'll say the one episode that I feel like you could maybe make an argument sort of built is the winter one where you play as Ellie and Joel is brutally wounded, but I just couldn't suspend my disbelief for that episode. Spoilers for The Last of Us, I guess. Joel has been impaled on a rusty iron rod. Maybe it's not rusty, but he's been fully impaled, falling from a story up. And I'm meant to believe that he not only gets out of there alive with a full hole through his body, but that he survives for at least a week, maybe longer. The game is not super clear about how long has happened, in a freezing cold basement without medicine.
It's interesting, so I never played the Left Behind DLC, but I know that the framing device of it's mostly a flashback to when Ellie got bitten.
Right.
But the framing of it is what happens in between the end of the school part and the start of winter. So I don't know how they handle that, but I think that was probably a common enough critique that they were well, we could address it here. So you're identifying things well, is what I mean.
It did just seem to me to be a totally unforced error. That, you could have changed almost nothing about that segment. You just need to give Joel a less dramatic injury at the school that gets infected.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? And I don't know. It was hard for me to connect to that segment because it just felt like this man is dead. This man has died. There's no way this guy survived this.
Yeah, what's interesting to me about you talking about narrative progression is I think the way it was structured actually helped that for me, because it felt like a bunch of interconnected short stories.
I see that.
Rather than one narrative. So it's every time it does it's cut to black and there's somewhere else, it's this story's done. We have that history in mind, but now we're at our new short story and we'll go up in stakes until the end and then drop back down and then go up in stakes until the end and then drop back down, essentially.
Yeah.
So I think maybe it's how you think about it. It's not there's a right or wrong way to think about it, right? It's just how you experience it when you play it. But I can see how thinking of it a whole long story all in one, these breaks in between where tons of time passes doesn't actually help that flow very well.
Yeah. And my next thing is a super positive and a kind of strong negative for the game is that I really appreciate the commitment to this being a game that is told from Joel's perspective. That's not necessarily like obvious throughout the game, but I think looking back, right, they do a good, clear job with the way that the story is structured of it being like you are playing this as Joel. It's not you playing the game as Joel. It's like this is Joel's story.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, the like cut to black before any emotion can be shown at the end of any of these stories makes total sense and does support that. For me, I needed something somewhere. I didn't need all of those cut the blacks to go away, but I didn't, and I appreciate the subtlety with which it builds the relationship between Joel and Ellie. I do think that is strong, but I just felt like I needed some bigger moment somewhere once, because it just made the ending segment at the hospital not quite land for me. It just felt as understated as everything else in the rest of the game. And I don't know. I wanted some tiny little bit more somewhere. It didn't even have to be there. That could have been as understated, but I don't know. I don't know exactly what I would have done differently. I just needed the game to like show how much to do a little bit of an emotional moment somewhere so that I could get this. I don't know.
I'm honestly, I don't know. Maybe you won't get to this for a while, which fair. But I'm honestly really interested to hear you play The Last of Us Part 2, based like on that critique that you have of the first one.
Mm-hmm.
I won't go into more detail than that for you,
fine.
But like based entirely on like that one critique that you repeated to me that like that there's not like an emotional moment for you. I'm very curious about your part 2 takes is all.
If it were me, I would have ended the game. They're going back to his brother's ranch. His brother's dead. His brother's a zombie.
Like add like a when you pitched that as like his brother like zombies up behind him and then the game ends, I was like, why do you want a comedy beat at the end? Like a dark comedy beat.
I don't want it to be comedy. I just wanted it to underscore the choice that he had made.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Like the idea that like his brother is a zombie now, is an infected now, and like he could have made a choice where he could have been saved, but
yeah,
he didn't.
I just think, and I think I said this to you already, the game is honestly not that concerned about like the fate of humanity. Like the weight of Joel's choice as far as like the game positions it for me is not like, oh, like you've cursed humanities to be zombies, but like, oh, like he knew that Ellie would have wanted to be the cure. Right, and he took that away from her and broke her trust doing it. And that's like the weight of his choice, not like there's more zombies now, if that makes sense.
I think that's going to be, to talk about the TV show just a little bit here, I think that's going to be really hard to land for the TV show.
Yeah.
I think that for me did not even really land totally for the game, because I was thinking about like, you just cursed all of humanity, dude. Yeah. Like, it's not even like this is this is a random mutation. Like, this could never happen. It's not even like there might be some other people out there.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is just that Joel is so unconcerned about it.
Right.
Which,
again, makes sense for the game. The game is very much like, you are Joel. You're thinking about this like Joel. I do think for a television show coming out in 2023, it's going to be very difficult.
It'll be weird.
It's going to be very difficult to convince the audience that this is about him breaking Ellie's trust, not about him saying, I don't give a crap if everybody dies.
Well, they might have to change that sort of perspective a little bit because of recent events.
Yeah.
Like, obviously people have a different perspective on like worldwide epidemics now than they did when this game came out.
Yeah.
So that's maybe a change for the TV show to consider.
I think it's a good sign that they are saying we're going to flesh out the middle of the story for the television show. Because I do think... I don't think that this particular story, the way they're marketing it, will be successful if it's like, actually, it's a series of short stories. Like, I think that's a TV show you could make. I don't think that the way they are talking about this story leads me to believe that that's how they're considering the arc for the TV version. But the pacing is weird as heck for a television show, especially when you don't have the built-in adrenaline of I'm sneaking around shooting guys for a while. So I'm not convinced that it's gonna work super well. I think it's gonna be a better adaptation than a lot of game stories because it is like a story that you could have made up for a TV show, as opposed you're not gonna make up Sonic the Hedgehog for a TV show. Yeah, like I get it. But I'm interested to see how they handle the pacing of it because it's right now it would be weird as a pretty direct adaptation. Also, one last thing, because my boyfriend told me that he read an article where they were like, in the TV show, we're going to acknowledge that, like, Joel is older. So, like, his hearing is kind of damaged from gunshots, and he's got, like, a bad knee, and that sort of thing. And I was like, actually, I don't want that.
In the TV show?
I don't want that at all. Like, yes, I know that Joel is, like, a middle-aged man in the game.
Like, I wouldn't want that in the game.
I don't even want it in the TV show. This guy has survived the zombie apocalypse for decades. Like, yes, I fully believe he's a superhero. Like, I absolutely believe he's an improbably good marksman, unless I'm playing him, in which case he's not. But, this guy survived, like, the apocalyptic outbreak of this. Like, absolutely, I believe that, like, he's an unbelievably fit.
Yeah, like, I think the one game quirk they should bring into the TV show is occasionally Joel should just have absolutely no idea where he's going. Yeah. And should just wander around a space being like, where do you want me to go? Because that was my experience of the game.
Occasionally his flashlight should stop working, but he's on the PS5 and it won't shake, so he's just gotta black out and try again.
Alright, it's a long one, but I've got one more game. The episode is a long one. I've got one more game. Do you have one more?
Me too, but too. I have a short closer, so it's fine.
Okay. Last game. I just finished this a couple of days ago. Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII Reunion. Woo! Yay.
Gungaga!
Gungaga! This is Gungaga! The ending of Crisis Core is, like, one of those things where, like, I, like, go into it, I'm like, I know it's emotional and sad, and I'm, like, determined, I'm not gonna cry, and it gets me a little bit anyway. Is just what I'll say about it. Every time that I see it, it gets me, like, a little bit, even though, like, I'm like, I know what happens. I understand what the last scene is. I'm not gonna cry this time, and then I do a little bit.
That's a good story.
So that's my Crisis Core recommendation. It's very, like, it is a remaster, like, with new models and textures, essentially. Like, they remade the models and textures, but the animation rigs are the same, and basically everything in the story is the same. There's, like, a couple of changes to make things more clear, or to, like, hit more. There's just a few English localization changes, I assume, to just fix lines that were just wrong in the original. But, like, when you, like, if you played Remake and then played this, you'd be like, oh man, this game's older, you know, in a lot of ways. Like, I think that, like, the moment-to-moment dialogue in Remake is just, it feels more natural. Whereas Reunion, like, Crisis Core, just, like, is, like, sometimes, like, what's happening? What are you talking about on, like, a moment-to-moment level? It does create, like, they're very iconic lines within this script, don't get me wrong. It is a very quotable game because of this quirk. But it doesn't feel quite as, like, back and forth in a natural sort of way, I guess, as a lot of Remake does to me. But I love Zach very much. it's a very interesting, like, he works for Shinra, like, throughout almost the whole thing, right? And really only by the end is he like, oh man, maybe this is bad. So it sort of creates, like, an interesting tone in that way where you're sort of aware, like, oh, we're sort of we're the baddies. Like on an audience level. But Zach is just, like, not aware until the end when he starts, like, having some doubts, which is interesting. But if you're going into it like, oh, you know, pure moral paragon Zach, it's not quite right, even though he's trying to be. It's very much about a guy who has no idea what's going on, trying to do his best, and beating up some theater kids along the way.
Good.
It's the plot of Crisis Core.
I'm sold.
But having played it's much better version than the PSP version. The combat is much more fun. I think it's just, it works as it was supposed to now. Because there's more buttons and they can do things better than on the PSP. They have the unique system of it. It's the DMV, which is basically like it's playing pachinko over and over again during battle, and it'll have different effects. So you'll randomly get like a limit, the break that you can do, or it'll null magic or AP for a little bit, or it'll like cut your costs, or it'll heal you or whatever.
Yeah.
And the way it's supposed to work is like create like exciting moments during combat where like things happen, you know?
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh, you're struggling, and then, oh, you got the limit cut. Aerith's gonna heal me, you know? And it's like creates like a moment of hype for you, like randomly within your experience. And that was just like not how, it just didn't work like that on the PSP from what I remember. But it works really well in this. I know a lot of people were, the original voice actor for Zack was Rick Gomez, and a lot of people really like his performance and were very resistant to having him recast. Like him especially, from beyond like the overall recasting of Final Fantasy VII. But I didn't have as much of a visceral reaction as a lot of people in the first place, but I really think this voice actor like manages to come into his own in this game. Despite the weaker script and like being able to be directly compared to his predecessor, I think that he really finds it and gets it by the end. And the final scene is probably better performed on both fronts from the two actors involved. So it's good. Mal's got to catch up.
I do got to catch up. A lot of Final Fantasy VII to play this year before it comes out next month in winter 2023.
There's a real big theater kid in Crisis Core, so you can enjoy feeling insulted, I guess.
Can't wait to beat him up. Think about all the people that wish the Final Fantasy VII remake had just been that.
Like what it is, like what Crisis Core is, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. They're making that mobile Ever Crisis thing that is sort of that.
Yeah.
For them, I guess.
But
I'm renewed in my excitement for Rebirth. I really want to know what they're gonna do. I'm so excited.
Hope Sora's there.
I hope he's not.
I hope you see Pluto like running down a hallway.
Pluto I'll accept. That goes in with like the stamp theme. Like Pluto's there now.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
Alright, one last one from me. Oh boy, here we go again.
Yeah.
It's Yakuza Like a Dragon. That's right. On Friday I started it. I couldn't resist. It was time.
Yes.
I'll keep it short with this because it's been a long 7 week. It's been a 7-week supersized episode, and I only played a couple hours. But a lot of toilets in those first couple hours. 2 big scenes in a bathroom and the plunger quest. Like, it just really building on the foundation of Kiryu having to find pocket tissues for someone having a bathroom emergency as a side quest in every Yakuza game.
Yeah. Picking
up the legacy. Quick Boyfriend thinks it's really funny. The hair, Ichiban's hair is really funny.
It is.
It's like, why did they decide that?
Because she doesn't know how to do a 90s haircut anymore.
I know that, but he was like, this is like a gag. This is a gag that they really committed to.
It very much works it makes him feel like a very different character, right?
No, I agree. That's what I said. I was like, Kiryu is like hard gel. This is like not that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll give quick thoughts on this. There'll be lots more in the next 6 weeks, I'm sure. I'm enjoying the turn-based so far, although when I go into combat, I immediately am ready to do like square, triangle, just like by reflex. But it doesn't, it moves quickly and it still feels good. So I am not so thrown by the turn-based combat yet. I think it's hilarious that it started with the chase mission.
Yeah.
I was like, exactly what everyone wanted. More chase mission. And my one thing that I'll dig into this week is it seems to have revealed Judgment as like an alternate universe game. Somebody wasn't counting.
Did you check this? Because I'm really curious if they really weren't counting.
Okay, so I did. Judgment takes place in December 2018. I've looked it up. It takes place in December 2018. And Ichiban gets out of prison sometime in 2019. Unclear when. It's not snowing. So, like, maybe I could give him the benefit of the doubt that it's, like, later in 2019. Unclear. But at some point. So his new cop pal, his new DMV pal, Adachi, tells him, about 2 years ago, the Omi Alliance came in and drove out the Tojo clan. So even if I'm being generous, and it's more like a year and a half, and we're kind of deep into 2019, still feels like that should have happened before the events of Judgment, given that at the best case scenario, Judgment is taking place like 9 months before these scenes.
Yeah.
So it just seems like someone was like, this makes sense with the events of Yakuza 6, which was in 2016, in that Kiryu's gone, so there's nobody to come back and save the family. Although I don't believe for a minute. I hope that Gaiden explains this. I don't believe for a minute that Kiryu doesn't hear that the Tojo clan is being rode out of town by the Omi and doesn't come crawling back to save his boy Daigo. But whatever. Like a nice try, game. I don't believe this. That's what made me like skeptical. I was like, I don't think so, Adachi. Like that doesn't sound plausible to me, given what I know about this man. But because like you could almost squint and justify it that in Judgment you're dealing with like pretty small potatoes Tojo families.
Yeah.
And so like if they're still sort of around, and it just feels like this would be relevant to Kaito though, in a way that it's hard to totally handwave. Like it's not so extreme that they couldn't exist in the same universe, but it is a little bit like, ooh,
yeah,
this doesn't quite square.
Yeah.
Like it could happen. It's just like, it's weird that nobody mentioned it.
Yeah. Well, if anything's not going to work, if Judgment doesn't quite work in the timeline, that's probably fine.
It just would have been nice if it did, because I want these guys to show up. That's all. I'd like these guys to turn up again.
Yeah.
I'd like for Like a Dragon 9 to be all three of them.
That would be really funny.
Anyway, excited for more. I will be interested to talk to you, although I know you came into this with like some Yakuza knowledge. I'm so interested at how this would play for someone who doesn't have the context, because like who cares that the Omi drove out the Tojo clan?
Well, because Ichiban was so attached to the guy, his dad.
I know,
dad.
they do a fine job doing it. I would just be interested, because for me it's very much like, ah. But I wonder how it would play if you're just like, oh, like, I just learned who these people are like 2 seconds ago.
I think for me it felt like, oh, there's like political maneuvering going on. Like the Omi driving out the Tojo wasn't super exciting, but what's his face? I can't remember his not dad's name right now. Ichiban's
Arakawa.
not dad being the
Arakawa.
one, like, you know.
Yeah.
That was like, whoa, for me. That was my whoa.
Also, sick hat.
Yeah.
All right, with that, listeners, thanks for tuning in for our 7-week recap here at Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
If you enjoyed the show, you should check us out. Follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games that are in the hat, and read our blog featuring long-running series Click Click Boyfriend and Split Screen. Finally, if you like the show, the most important thing you can do is subscribe so you never miss an episode. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, anywhere that you can find podcasts, wherever you found the podcast today. Subscribe to Talk This. Next week, we're back to our main editions. I can say them because Emma told me the names of the games before the show. We're talking about Armored Core and The Quarry.
Yep.
Armored Quarry.
Armored Quarry.
So look forward to that, and then to my side quest in a couple of weeks. Games for when it's cold.
Do you have a sign-off for us, Melon?
Sure. Listeners, I hope that this week your quietest season is short, your timelines line up, and you get some sick combos.